Hi class, we're on to chapter 4 now, and we're going to get started. We'll be talking about attitudes, values, and ethics. So, attitude. An attitude is a psychological tendency expressed by evaluating an entity with some degree of favor or disfavor. You like something or you don't like something else, okay? So favor or disfavor. Attitudes, behaviors, and cognition are different things. Attitude comes in three different places. That's affect, behavior, and cognition. And an affect is things like how you feel. I don't like my boss. For example, that would be affect. Behavior is what you do, okay? And so if you, because of that, you want to transfer to another department, that's a behavior. And then cognition deals with how you're thinking, so attitude scales, or so I believe that my boss plays favorites or something along those lines. That would be the cognition behind the feeling, which is the affect, and which leads to the behavior. Cognitive dissonance is a state of tension that's produced when an individual experiences conflict between attitudes and behavior, or it could be between two behaviors or between two attitudes. But cognitive dissonance means, you know, what I'm doing and what I think I should be doing aren't really lining up. Okay, two influences on attitude formation are direct and social learning. So direct experience is one thing, and you know what direct experience is. You've had direct experiences all your life. Social learning is looking around at other people, your family, your peers, your religious organizations, your schools, your culture, those kind of things, and kind of understanding what's going on from them. So when you're processing this, so learners must focus on what's going on the model. They must retain what's going on. So they must focus, they must retain, they must practice the behavior in order to learn, and then they must be motivated. So that's the four processes for social learning. They must understand what's going on. In order to retain it, they have to practice it, and they have to be motivated. Now, workers' attitudes. How does this play out in an organization? In an organization, we deal with things like job satisfaction. Okay, are you satisfied with your job? Is it a positive experience? Is it a negative experience? The more positive it is, the more likely it is that you'll be engaging in OCB, or organizational citizenship behaviors. Now, these are behaviors that go beyond what your job description is. So your job description is to fill out certain reports, but if you're volunteering for extra committees or other assignments or to help other people or whatever, it's likely that you actually are satisfied with your job. That's leading to the volunteering and the organizational citizenship behaviors. Now, when you're dealing with work attitudes, we're dealing with things like normative commitment, and that's your perceived obligation to remain. Okay, so if you've said, look, I'm going to be here for the next 5 years or whatever, that's normative commitment. Effective commitment is your desire to do so. Now, your normative and effective commitment may be different. You may not really want to stay, but you feel obligated. So here, you may not want to, but you feel obligated. Okay, and an organizational commitment is the strength of an individual's identification with the organization. I mean, if you really identify with it, you're very closely tied to it. I don't know how it is at LCC for you, but for me, when I was an undergraduate student at Liberty University in the United States, I very heavily identified with it, and I was very proud to be there, very happy to be there. I wasn't looking to go somewhere else or thinking if only I had gone to, right? So that's organizational commitment. And then when I came back 10 years later to be a professor there, it was the same kind of feeling. Continuance commitment is that you can't afford to leave. You know, you have to pay the bills, or you're just kind of stuck where you are. That's continuance commitment. So there's different types of work attitudes. Let's shift gears and talk about values. Values are, as opposed to attitudes, which are kind of feelings or kind of this is how I think about something. Values are enduring beliefs that specific mode of conduct or end state of existence is personally or socially preferable to an opposite or converse mode of conduct. So values are stronger, they're deeper, they resonate more with you. Okay, values can be in two different camps. You have instrumental values, and then you have terminal values. Instrumental values are those that are acceptable behaviors used to achieve some end state. Right? Terminal values are the end states themselves. Okay, so one is how you get there, instrumental, how you get there, and the other is terminal. Now, what's interesting about this is that different, I mean, so Rokeach has a series of values and that you can look through and kind of get a sense of, and you'll see this in my chapter. You're going to read chapter 4 and watch this, and then you're going to read my chapter 5, which is from my textbook on management. You're just going to compare notes between what you saw in the end of chapter 2 and here. Just compare notes mentally, and you'll get a good sense of some differences. So as we talk about values, for example, values, work values, so some people value achievement over everything else. Well, that's different than valuing fairness or something along those lines. Some people value concern for others over other things. Some people value honesty above others, and some fairness. And different people in different cultures even have different value structures. So Chinese cultures value an individual's contributions to the relationships in the work team, where Americans value a contribution to the task. Now that's a very different thing, right? The relationships, keeping the harmony, that's very common in a Chinese cultural experience. But how do you produce for the task is the way that Americans tend to see it. Now here's different cultural values. If you want to understand how to deal with it, learn about those values. Don't prejudge just because you come from a particular thing. Keep an open mind to try to understand it first. Maybe they're worse, maybe they're better. Just keep an open mind first. Don't prejudge. Judge after you have some knowledge, perhaps, but don't prejudge. Operate legitimately within others' ethical points of view. That means that there's some room for some differences. Be okay with room for legitimate differences. Avoid rationalizing borderline actions. Refuse to violate fundamental values, and be open about this. Now, this is really interesting. There's different value combinations, and so this is imported from a different textbook, not mine even. This was from another one. So executives tend to have, as a group, these values as their primary terminal values: self-respect, family security, freedom, a sense of accomplishment, and happiness. Well, how does that stack up against union members? Well, they tend to value similar things, but not all. Family security, yep, that was number 2. Freedom, yep, that was number 3. Happiness, yeah, that was number 5. Self-respect, yep, that was up here. And mature love, well, that wasn't even on here at all. So they tend to have a very different, not a very different view, but a different order of the top values. And then if you look at like political activists, they're nowhere near it, right? Look at this. What do we have here? Similar kinds of things. Equality, not on it. A world at peace, not on it. Family security, yeah, that's in both. And then self-respect, okay, I can see self-respect and self-respect. And freedom, right? But equality and a world at peace is very different, right? Now, what are their instrumental values to go there? Honest, responsible, capable, ambitious, independent. Responsible, honest, courageous, independent, capable. Similar. Honest, helpful, courageous, responsible, capable. Similar kinds of things. But look at the difference right here is going to make a big difference in the way that they function. Okay, so how you rate or how you put these value combinations together, it's going to be important. It's worth taking the time to go through and look at what your values are, your terminal values and your instrumental values. Ethical behavior. Ethical behavior is acting in ways consistent with one's personal values and the commonly held values of the organization and society. Now, that's the way the textbook here defines it. I define it differently in my textbook, and I want you to compare notes. Think through what is really ethical. What's real? I mean, as from God's perspective, what's ethical? I mean, He's given a certain parameters of what you should and shouldn't do to glorify Him or to not harm your fellow man. How does that stack up with what's going on perhaps in society? Society is not necessarily the standard. Different societies have different standards. Okay. Now, individual organizational model of ethical behavior is that you have individual influences that have value systems, locus of control, Machiavellianism, cognitive moral, and you also have organizational influences that both fill and spill into what is considered ethical behavior. But I would say this. This is inadequate by itself. There's something else. There's got to be a plus something, right? If you're not adding something to this mix, and maybe even deleting something, the norm of your organization may or may not be ethical. right? Or the norm of your society, a particular norm in your society may or may not be ethical. So you got to factor those kind of things in. You'll do that with my chapter when you're starting to read through and think through these. Okay. Finally, we get to Lawrence Kohlberg's cognitive moral development, and this is taught in a lot of textbooks. It's taught in many ethics classes, but it's also inadequate. He does something right in a sense where he's looking at, look, there are different levels that you work through. As a little baby, when I talk to my 2-year-old about, hey, don't take that candy, what's the baby trying to do? She's trying to avoid punishment, right? And then she's also trying to serve her immediate interests, but there's more to it than that. Eventually, I'm trying to be a good child, and you're trying to live up to expectations, and in society, obey societal law. Great. But then eventually you're looking at principles of justice and right and trying to really think through those kind of things and actually, understand what your ethical principles are and live up to these. That's all well and good as it stands, but there's something missing in Kohlberg, and that is that Kohlberg defines what's right and wrong in terms of, are you harming another? But that's not how the scriptures define what's right and wrong. It's what are you supposed to do as a reflection of the image of God, and are you doing that? So even if you're not hurting someone else, if you're hating someone, that's wrong. That's ethically wrong to hate that person if that person is also a human made in the image of God, and it's an affront to God. But even if it's not hurting that other person, so there are places where it's wrong when it hurts somebody. That's easy to see. But there are other places where it's wrong because it's hurting you, or it's hurting nobody, but it's still wrong before God, and you want to add that in. So I'm saying all that to say, from a Christian point of view, you have to add something else. There's got to be more to it than what you see here. And I want you to think through that as you read through my chapter 5. Okay, that's it for this session. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.